In 1945, when I was born at Colorado General Hospital. That was located at 8th and Colorado Boulevard at the time. You know, the racial makeup of Colorado would have been probably less than 4 or 5% of the population in Colorado would have been black. At that point in time, Latinos were probably somewhere in the same range of 5 to 10%. And there was some Asian families that lived in Colorado, but the majority of the residents of Denver and Colorado were white. Well, the schools were segregated based really on where people lived. And so I always went to Steck Elementary School. Steck Elementary School is located on 3rd and Albion Street. Albion is just about 4 blocks to the east of Colorado Boulevard. That was the same elementary school that my mother went to. My mother started off at Bromwell. When Steck was built, she and her brothers and sisters went to Steck. At that time, with respect to Steck, I'd have to say that 95% of the kids going to Steck would have been white. Now, there was a period of time, probably from about 1950 to 1955, that my parents resided over in the Five Points area at 27th and Race. But my parents always felt that the white schools were of better quality, had better teachers, had better books and supplies than the black schools did. So from 1950 to 1955, my parents drove my brother and I over to Steck every single day. And they used my grandparents' address as the address that we were living in so that we could go to Steck School. My parents built their own home in 1956. And so from 1956 until 1963, we lived at a separate home on Garfield Street, and I continued to go to DPS schools. And during that whole time frame, 95% of the kids in school would have been white. The community was very tight-knit. And when I say that, socially, in terms of going to church, we always went to Scott's Methodist Church. Scott's Methodist Church was over in the black community, and so we would attend that church. In terms of social functions, at least as a teenager, in going to dances, I would go to the different dances at East High School, Manual High School, Cathedral High School. In terms of house parties, the house parties that I would attend, and this is during my high school years, would have been black fellow students that I knew from East and Manual and Cathedral. One of the very first house parties I can remember was at Buddy Knoll's house. Buddy Knoll, his dad was a doctor. His mom ended up being on the Denver School Board. And I can remember at 16 years of age going to a house party at Buddy's home. Buddy at that time, his parents were one of the very first families that broke the red line living east of York Street. So they had a home on right on the corner of 26th and Adams Street. And that home was purchased sometime after the 50s, and it was actually one of the very first black homes east of York Street. So that was the red line. The red line at that time was York Street. As time went by, the red line became Monaco. It became a point of let's say, achievement when a person was able to buy a home on Monaco Boulevard. And when I say a person, a black person was able to buy a home on Monaco Boulevard. Marion Qualls was one of the early black police officers. I can remember him as a traffic officer directing traffic down on 16th Street. And we always had a sense of pride seeing him direct traffic on 16th Street in downtown Denver. Casey Simpson, those were two of the early black police officers. Casey Simpson just recently died of COVID, and he eventually became a captain in the Denver Police Department. But there were black firemen. My mother's closest friend in high school married Fred Jackson, who was a black fireman. Other prominent black people were people that had city jobs, driving the city buses. Robert Lewis, I can remember Robert Lewis because he had a son that went to high school with me, but his dad drove a city bus. So those were, but other, Buddy Knoll's uncle was a dentist, Andrew Knoll, so he was our dentist. So there was a scattering, including the different black people that were working in different government offices. Denver had the Air Force Finance Center. Denver had Laurie Air Force Base. My dad was a technical illustrator. He was one of the few black individuals that worked for Morton Marietta. But the social structure was such that the black people that had what I would call the middle class jobs, we knew each other, we socialized with each other. Some of those individuals also had cabins up in Lincoln Hills. I know that my parents had to deal with a different type of social structure and a different type of social tension. I know my mom, who is fair-skinned, that when she was a teenager, she was hired by one of the local department stores as a sales clerk. And because she was fair-skinned, they didn't know that she was black. But my mom, once she told her supervisor that she was black, she went from being a sales clerk to being to working basically in the back of the store, basically stocking as a stock girl. And it was, and my mother would tell me about during her time growing up in Denver as a teenager and as a young adult, that when they would go to a movie theater, they had to sit in the balcony at a movie theater. But at the time of, let's say, my teenage years, and my teenage years would have been in the late 50s, early 60s, there was not the overt racism. But like many black people, I learned and saw police abuse at a very early age. I was probably 6 or 7 years of age when I saw my dad get roughed up by a white cop for making a California stop in North Cherry Creek. The police officer stopped him, made him get out of the car, shoved him up against the hood of the car, and basically was inquiring why was this black man in North Cherry Creek over on, I remember the stop, took place right at 5th and Garfield Street, 2 blocks from our house. My brother and I were in the back seat of the car, and so that was my first instance of recognizing that we as black people were going to be treated differently by a police officer. There were social situations where, because I was going to all-white schools, that there was occasions where I was not welcome to certain type of events. So my family would talk about those types of situations. There was, of course, in the late 60s, when I returned from law school wearing a large afro hairdo, that my mother and dad were both fearful that because of the hairdo I was wearing, that I was going to put myself in jeopardy, whether it was by police or by other people. But that would have been in the late 60s when I started wearing the afro hairdo. So when you say having the conversation, well, the conversation is really an evolving conversation based upon situations that happen as you grow up. And that situation for me started when I was 7 years of age. And so my parents were always wary that there was racism. There were going to be certain people that were going to treat me different or dislike me because of my skin color. In 1963, I went away to college. I was 17 years of age. I went away to the University of Redlands. In August of that year, there was the March on Washington, so I was aware of the March on Washington. In September, when I was at the University of Redlands, I became aware by newspaper reports of the Birmingham bombing. So the Birmingham church bombing, that was in August of, that was in September of '63. And then in November of 1963, there was the assassination of John Kennedy. So those were 3 definite incidents that impacted me, but at that time, I was away in college. I was in Redlands, California. And so when we, and what ended up is I returned to Colorado in September of '64 and transferred to Boulder. So from 1964 to 1967, 9 months of the year, I was in Boulder. So I would have to say, honestly, that the types of tensions that were going on maybe in other cities, I was not feeling that type of tension here in Denver or in Boulder because of where I was situated. Now, in 1970, after I graduated from law school, it had been my aspiration to be a Denver public defender. I applied at the Denver Public Defender's Office. I was rejected to be hired at the Denver Public Defender's Office because I had had that 1-year experience as a law clerk for the Denver DA's office. The Public Defender's Office at the time had this philosophy that if you had prior police experience or prosecution experience, you would not make a good public defender. So I ended up, although wanting to be a public defender when I graduated from law school, I took my second choice. And the second choice was being a Denver district attorney. At the time I was hired, I was the only black deputy district attorney in the state of Colorado. There must have been 400 or more deputy DAs across the state. That my experience in terms of being the only or one of a few is the way I grew up in Denver. So it was not the type of impediment that prevented me from doing what I wanted to do or excelling at what I wanted to do. I had the type of family support and the type of confidence instilled in me by my family, and this goes all the way back to my great-grandfather, my grandparents, my parents, that I could do and exceed at whatever I put my mind to. I left the district attorney's office for a monetary reason. I had reached the top salary in 1974. The top salary was $18,000 per year. When I started as a deputy district attorney in 1970, I was making $8,500 a year. So I went from $8,500 to the top salary of $18,000. I also felt that I had reached a level of achievement within the office, being a chief trial deputy, having tried murder cases, that it was time to take the next step in terms of the advancement of my career, and that was going to the U.S. Attorney's Office. What was unique about going to the U.S. Attorney's Office for me is I decided not to go into the criminal division. I decided to go into the civil division. I thought that the civil division would give me additional experience in areas of the law that I had not been involved in before. So when I went into the U.S. Attorney's Office, I got assigned to land condemnation. So that was an area of work that I did. I did what were called Federal Tort Claims Act cases. Those are personal injury cases where, let's say, a postal employee was in a truck and ran over a pedestrian, and the post office got sued for personal injury. I handled those cases. I handled medical malpractice cases for government doctors and dentists. And I handled civil rights cases, employment cases, where the government was being sued for discrimination. Spike Eklund contacted me because he and I had been friends since college days. We had attended CU Boulder together. We had worked in the Denver District Attorney's Office as deputy DAs for several years. And so Spike Eklund persuaded his two other partners that the three of them should reach out to me to come to their law firm. So my aspiration in law school was always to own my own law firm. That was what I was attempting to achieve while I was in law school, was to own my own law firm. So when these three young men, because they were all probably in their early 30s at the time, approached me about coming to their law firm, I accepted their offer, and so the law firm became DeManna, Eklund, Chancho, and Jackson. If we look at the civil rights movement in this country, the civil rights movement and the progress and the successes that we've had in the civil rights movement have been the results of trial lawyers such as Thurgood Marshall, him elevating himself to be a Solicitor General and then a Supreme Court Justice. I believe that when you have people of color at the top positions, whether it be in the judiciary or the legislature or the executive department, that there can be the types of decisions that are made that are going to positively impact the people. It's also my feeling that the judicial department, We have three different departments: legislative, executive, judicial. The citizens of our country, the greatest impact is going to come from the judiciary. People coming into court, whether it's on a traffic matter, whether it's a divorce, whether it's probate, whether it's personal injury, the most direct contact that our citizens have are with judges. And this is my feeling as to the importance of having a diverse bench, so that not only are we involved in making the decisions and impacting the decision, but we have the ability to be role models, where others who see us can say to themselves, well, I can be a judge too. We definitely have more work to do. Sometimes I feel that what took place this summer with the George Floyd, the killing of the black man at the Wendy's restaurant, the killing in Georgia of the jogger, for me personally, it's almost like post-traumatic stress disorder. It's just another incident accumulating with the incidents that we first talked about in 1963. And then, of course, 1968, and I've had the occasion to live through the Rodney King situation in LA. And so these are all incidents that make me aware that we have a history of unequal treatment with black people. And it is just my hope that what is taking place right now is really a movement rather than just a moment in time, that we're not going to see the type of systemic changes that need to be made. You know, I look at our history of black people and the accomplishments that we've made, but the reality is white people have had a 400-year head start on this. We did not have the opportunity, let's say within the legal profession, to go to state law schools until after 1954. So it is only since 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, that the law schools have been opened up so that a Thurgood Marshall would have the opportunity going to his home law school of the University of Maryland. He did not have the opportunity to go to the University of Maryland, ended up going to an HBCU law school. And so we have lots of work to be done. Well, one of the things I'm most proud of is being the co-founder of the Sam Cary Bar Association, creating an association that is getting ready to celebrate its 50th year. When I became a lawyer back in 1970 in Colorado, there were approximately 15 black attorneys in the state. Now we have several hundred black attorneys within the state. So one of the things I'm most proud of is being one of the founders of the Sam Cary Bar Association. You know, I'm proud of my family. I am proud that I have two children. I have a son that graduated from CU Law School. Although he decided not to be a lawyer, he is a wealth advisor. I have a daughter that is involved in the educational system, that is a school psychologist. I have, so I'm proud of my family, and of course my wife, who has her own business as a real estate agent. You know, in terms of personal accomplishments, a couple weeks ago, the American Board of Trial Advocates, which is a national trial lawyers association with the best and brightest lawyers on both sides of the aisle, plaintiff, defense, they selected me for the Judicial Excellence Award. So I was selected as being the top judge out of 367 judges and justices in Colorado by my peers. And when I say by my peers, these are the trial lawyers who try cases in Colorado. Prior to coming on the bench, I was a member of the American Board of Trial Advocates, as well as their president in 2004. So in terms of personal accomplishments, getting that award from my peers as the top judge in Colorado is my greatest personal accomplishment. Well, my hope is seeing young people of all skin complexion coming together and trying to make a more equitable society. And as a judge, back in June and April and July, when I saw the protests, marchers walk around the courthouse in the city and county building, and I saw these protesters as young as young teenagers, and some as old as seniors like me, and of all different complexions coming together to say that what is taking place is not fair and not equitable, and wanting to make a change. This is what gives me hope. And so hope is what brought my great-grandfather to Colorado. And so I've been instilled with hope for a long, long time. And it is my hope that things will get better.